We're going to talk about this gentleman's video right here today. The name of the, let's see if I can get this on here. The name of the channel is The Lawn Lover. The name of the article is 4 Things to Do Now for a Thriving Lawn Next Spring. Now we've talked about, we're talking about thatch moving forward, but this has to do with what we've been talking about in fall, cool season, fall fertility. And in here he has some 4 pointers. I'm only going to talk about 3 of them. The last one is just says keep mowing until it stops growing, which is fine. The first one, I'll just play it, but the first one is not rocket science, but we'll play through it and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to walk through it a little bit. So the guy, I think the guy's name is Justin. For those listening, he's standing out on someone's yard. I'm assuming it's his yard, sunny day, sunglasses on, using a selfie camera stick or something and talking into the microphone as he's talking about 4 things to do now for a thriving lawn next spring. And he's in Indiana. He says in the video, he's in Northeast Indiana. Here we go.
Now, the first thing you're going to want to do is try to clean up your leaves and get those off the lawn. Now you can see back here, I did that the other day. Now the key tip here is that you want to get these leaves off of your lawn. Now there's a debate between mulching and removing.
So I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but his first tip is remove the leaves. There's a study being conducted right now, and I know I'm going to get this wrong. I apologize. I think it's in Minnesota. I could be wrong. Maybe it's in Wisconsin. And I think, I'm not going to say the professor's name because I'm going to get it wrong. But they're looking at various influences of different quantities of leaves and how to manage those on turfgrass. That study, as far as I know, is still being conducted and hasn't been published. It'll be published at sometime soon. But in general, until we have greater evidence, what he's saying here is mostly true. You know, just remove the leaves, mulch them in if it's reasonable quantities. If it's so much like in my yard, where I literally, after I've mulched them with a mower, there's still a thick layer of cut up leaves to the point where you can barely see the turf grass. And I have 3-inch cut tall fescue, turf type tall fescue. So in those situations where the leaves are enormous, it's probably best to remove those because there's so many leaves that it's actually very likely resulting in a reduction in turf growth and quality. But if the leaves are minimal, like as I said, you guys know from now, I've removed a lot of my trees. And nowadays, if I can keep it up, if I can mow occasionally and kind of keep the leaves mulched up, it's really not that bad. And so in those cases, just mulch them up. If it's too heavy, remove them. Plain and simple. Now let's go to the next point.
Fall. Now the second tip I'd have for you guys is to start lowering your height of cut. So we're at the end of October here, season's starting to wind down. Watch the weather. I know here for Northeast Indiana, this is our last little stretch of nice weather. So what I'm going to do coming next week when things start hitting freezing temperatures at night is I'm going to start lowering this height of cut. Now typically I'll mow between 3 and 3.5 inches. This year I've experimented down to 2.75 inches. I've used the Luba because it mows at that height, and I've also done that with my Time Master.
The Luba is a robotic mower, by the way, if you're unaware of that. He's showing the robotic mower on his lawn. I'm not familiar with that mower. Have no reason to doubt that it works fine.
So currently I'm maintaining at 3.25 on the Time Master, just trying to maintain these leaves and stuff. But as the weather starts to slow and you get in that last cut or two of the season, I'll drop that down. Now what this is going to do for you is keep that grass short. And here in the Midwest, you know, we get a lot of snowpack usually in the winter. And the shorter grass you have, especially if you have kids out playing in the lawn in the snow, it's going to keep that grass to where you're not going to get it matted down and hopefully help out with not getting snow mold and issues coming out of winter into next spring.
So he says he recommends lowering the height of cut to reduce the chance of disease, basically, is what he's saying. So this is a claim. And the question is, how do we know it's true or not? Okay, he's just making stuff up. You should do this. and has no evidence to support it. But how do you know? I mean, well, okay, most YouTubers are probably going to watch this and do nothing. A handful of them are going to watch it and then go lower their high to cut. Very, very few, from my perspective, my opinion, are actually going to bother to go look up his claim to see whether or not there's any evidence to support it. But I'm in that category. So what do we do when I'm looking at recommendations or turfgrass management practices within a given state? The first thing I do is I go look at the turfgrass publications from the faculty in that state. Okay, there's many other ways to do it. You can go straight to the literature if you want to, but generally, if you can go to the extension bulletins or publications from the faculties in that state, you can get an idea of what they're recommending. You kind of understand, okay, this is what the faculty are saying to do in that location. It's going to be more site specific than, a paper that was conducted in Connecticut on Indiana turf, right? So in Indiana, if they have publications from Purdue about turfgrass how to cut, I would rather rely upon those results or those papers than a paper conducted in Wisconsin or in Kentucky, just because I know that they have site-specific information. So that's what I do. And I encourage the faculty there's especially one faculty who will remain nameless at an institution well north of me, who does not follow these recommendations. When you go into somebody else's state and you start providing recommendations and you start spitting out turfgrass, management practices, and you're from University ABC in some other state, it's probably not wise to do that. You probably should actually contact the faculty in that state to see what the most evidence-based information is that they're generating, rather than jump into, say, South Florida or Lexington and start spitting out information to convince people that they should be following your recommendations. And when you don't have any knowledge, really, of the local dynamics, okay, Mr. So-and-so, Dr. So-and-so. Okay, let's go. So what do? I go to Purdue. I go to Google and I type in Purdue Turfgrass Science Publications. And when I go there, you will find this website, which Purdue has one of the more easy flowing and identifying sort of websites to, see if I can do this again. I'm just going to screw this thing up once more. To go find information. Okay, so Purdue's turfgrass documents are really easily categorized. So if you go in here and you go, okay, I'm looking for information on, mowing how to cut on during the fall for tall fescue in Indiana. You go through here and you say establishing a turf lawn, maintaining a home lawn, weed control, disease control, insect control, and pesticide information. Well, it's not going to be under weeds, disease, insects, and pesticides, and establishing is not going to be there. So you'll go to maintaining a home lawn. So you click on maintaining a home lawn, and there's a variety of different publications in here. You can see all Purdue's publications, facts about phosphorus and fertilizing and all sorts of stuff. But what I'm looking for is high to cut relative to the calendar, relative to the time of year. So they're down here. There's a maintenance calendar for Indiana lawns. And if you click on this PDF, actually, maybe just click on this. Now, let me try the PDF. See what happens. Okay. You're going to find a PDF that pops up with various calendar items. So March, and you're going to say the maintenance level of the turf is high. You're going to watch for snow mold damage as snow recedes in March. If the maintenance level is high, if the maintenance level is medium or low, you're not even going to bother with that. And you're going to go through the different months, March, April, May, and it has all the various, whether you're high maintenance or medium maintenance and so forth, and all the various things you should be looking at during the season. Well, this gentleman is talking about October, moving into November, lowering your high to cut. So let's go down to October and look moving into November and see what we find. If I can get this on the screen. We go into November and we have high, medium, and low lawns. So all lawn expectations, all homeowners, regardless of your expectation or your desired turf quality. The very last line in November says continue mowing at 2.5 to 3.5 inches. In capital letters, it says do not reduce the mowing height for the last few mowings. Continue mulching tree leaves into the turf. So when you have a YouTuber saying lower your height of cut because you're going to reduce diseases or whatever in the spring, and you don't know what's true, go to the Land Grant Institution website, to the Turfgrass, faculty's website in that location, and look it up. Now, one can argue, well, that's just the faculty saying that. True, they're not showing any evidence either in this publication, but these publications are centered on published evidence. I don't know what Purdue does, but in UF and at UK, where I've published many extension publications, it still has to go through a peer review process. It still has to be vetted to ensure the information is supported by evidence as best we can. Okay. So knowing that, I'm pretty confident that there's a good reason why the Purdue faculty put this in here. Do not reduce the mowing height. One guy says, reduce the mowing height. So I'm inclined to follow the Purdue turfgrass management recommendations before I follow any YouTuber trying to make a few bucks off of a video, saying whatever he wants to say because he doesn't have any more content to spew out. So he's going to come up with something so he can create a new video. Okay. So don't be fooled. What he said could be true, it could not be true. Take time to look it up. Look at Purdue's turf, in this case, Purdue's in Indiana. And it says right here, do not reduce clippings. Okay. So let's go to the next part where he talks about fertility. Okay. We're going to see if I can get this back on the screen here. Here we go. Okay, here we go, guys. The next part is fertilizing your lawn.
Now, the third and probably most important step that I would recommend here is now is the prime time to fertilize your cool season lawn. You want to use up what you have. So if you have extra fertilizer in your garage, depending on what it is, put it down. Typically, I like to use a starter fertilizer in the fall just to set it up for next spring.
Okay. So he's saying use a starter fertilizer in the fall before the freeze. Actually, let me continue because he talks about freeze here in a second.
But if you have other stuff laying around, basically you're going to want a high nitrogen boost is what most people aim for. It's not a necessity to do that. This year I used up the rest of what I had from Turf Titan in relation to Thatch Buster, Lawn Commander, and I used up a little bit of the Lawn Striper that I had left. So I put that down on the lawn probably a few days ago. Now you can fertilize up until the ground freezes here in Northeast Indiana.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to get into. So you can go back and look at all the videos that we've gone over. But we have gone over various phosphorus papers. And in locations where phosphorus is already high and or the turfgrass is not exhibiting a phosphorus deficiency, you need to get phosphorus out of your program. Okay, if the turfgrass is not exhibiting a phosphorus deficiency, get it out of your program. If the turfgrass appears to be maybe showing a phosphorus deficiency, and that has been confirmed with the soil test showing that it's low, then you can consider using phosphorus. But putting down a starter fertilizer in the fall is against every known BMP that I can possibly think of, unless you're establishing a lawn, which you shouldn't be if the ground's freezing. Okay, so when the ground's frozen or about to freeze, this gentleman's argument is, if I let it continue, what his argument is, put it down before it freezes so it moves into the soil and then it's stored in the soil. Right. Let me just show that so you don't think I'm fibbing to you here.
So that'll be typically after those temperatures start to fall. You'll notice the ground temps will take a little bit to freeze up. So put that down to where it can dissolve in with rain, because most of us have our irrigation off, hoses pulled in with the cold temps. But get that stuff down on the ground, and like I said, you can do it until the ground freezes to make sure it gets into your soil and it's going to store over the winter. Now you don't want to do this too soon. We're in a prime time to do this because you don't want that grass using up all those nutrients before next spring.
Yeah, you don't want the grass to use up the nutrients you applied. You definitely don't want that. You definitely don't want the turf grass to take up the nutrients that you just applied. I mean, come on, guys. It's absurd. So when you're applying nutrients, the only purpose to a turf grass in the world of turf grass lawns is to enhance the quality beyond some unacceptable limit to get it to the point where it's acceptable. And the only way that's going to happen is if the turf grass takes it up. So if you're putting out nutrients at a time that you're saying, I don't want the turf grass to take it up, then don't apply it. Okay, wait until that's an appropriate time that the grass is actively growing, and then apply the nutrients, or just slightly before that if you can, anticipate or predict, the time of year. Let's say it's going to start growing every year at whatever, April 1. Then you can go out a week or so before that if you want to. If it's, if it's going to be actively growing, you're going to start mowing it at that time. But to apply nutrients when the turf grass it is not going to take it up, when the ground is frozen, when the grass is no longer growing, it makes no agronomic sense. And the argument is, it'll store it in the soil and it'll pop out next spring or whatever, which the evidence clearly shows that the grass will be greener with those fall applications, right? It will be greener. It won't grow that much during the winter. That's true. But it also shows you can just wait and avoid all the environmental risk and apply it in the early spring. And that's what the Mangiafico and Gallard paper showed. These late season applications, the fall and the winter applications of nitrogen, will increase the environmental risk greatly compared to applying those nutrients earlier on when the turf grass has an opportunity to take it up. Okay, so let's go back to the Purdue paper, and I'm going to give him a pass on this one. Okay, so I think this guy's name is Justin. Apologize if that's incorrect. I'm going to give him a pass on this one because of what the Purdue paper says. So we go back to the Purdue paper, and it says in September, apply 1 pound of N. Okay. In October, it doesn't say apply any nitrogen. But then in November, it says apply 1.5 pounds of N. Can I draw on that? No, I can't draw on this. 1.5 pounds of nitrogen. It says use fast release nitrogen plus such as urea and apply after the final mowing, but while the grass is still green. So that's still in the Purdue turf grass extension paper. Sorry if it got off the screen there. I apologize. I'm not going to constantly switch these back and forth. I apologize. It's still in there. So I'll give the guy a pass on that. But remember, we had Dr. Bigelow on. You can go back and look at the guest playlist and pull up Dr. Bigelow's present or discussion with me. And in there, he stated that he showed in his early publications in his career that the November application did have some benefit for sure. But he also stated that he would not recommend that today. Okay. Because of the potential environmental risk associated with those late fall and winter applications. So Justin, I'll give you a pass on this one because it is in the Purdue paper and it's up to Purdue to, when was this even? Oh, this had Clark Throssell on it. So this document is old. It has Zach Riker and Clark Throssell. This document is what, at least, when was it published? Probably at least 15 years. I forget when Clark left Purdue. I don't see a date on here, but so it's an out of date pub. At least that part is out of date, and it probably needs to be updated with Dr. Bigelow's comment, meaning he probably wouldn't recommend that today, even though you see a turf response. The risk is the potential risk of environmental impairment is too great. Okay, so when you come across these YouTube things, as I mentioned the other day, I don't have any responsibility to refute this guy's claims because he didn't provide any evidence to support it. But that's only in cases where your desire is to convince him or to convince somebody else that you're right or wrong or whatever the case is. In this case, I just wanted to show that when you're presented this information, take some time before you just implement it. Take some time to actually go to the university's website, the Turfgrass website, which in the case of Purdue is outstanding, far better than Kentucky's. Even when I was there, I couldn't find my own documents on the Kentucky website. But Purdue's is very good, very easy to follow. So when you have two conflicting recommendations in the same state, one's coming from the university faculty and one's coming from a YouTuber, the chances are pretty good that the information coming from the university faculty is more accurate. Okay. So, do a little homework, do your due diligence, and you can avoid some of these bad recommendations. And just like the king, the mice, and the cheese, you follow a recommendation that's poor, and then it keeps compounding. We lower that height of cut at that time of year. Who knows what's going to happen down the road? It could be better, it could be worse, and then you have to do something else to make it better, and do something else to make that better, and you're constantly compounding the problems. Rather, if you just left it alone, kept the height of cut as it was, and just let the turf go to sleep, you probably were better off.